Hello, in this video, we want to talk about the certified and interview of the Wellcome Corp program. If your application is marked certified, your application have been approved for Wellcome Corp. Wellcome Corp is going certification to send you an email that tells you that you are certified, and this email contains some information. Being approved for Wellcome Corp does not guarantee that your refugee will be admitted into the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program, the USRAP program. The refugee who is the primary contact on your application is going to be contacted by the Refugee Support Center, the RSC. It might take the RSC a few weeks up to a few months to contact them after your application has been certified. If a refugee is rejected by the USRAP program, this means application is going to be out from the Wellcome Corp program. You and your sponsorship group will have to decide if you want to submit a new application for a different group of refugees. Even though your group has been certified, Wellcome Corp does not know how long it will take before refugee family will arrive in the United States. Once the RSC contacts the refugees, they will begin the process to be in the Refugee Admissions Program for the U.S. This means that they will be issued a new number. Now, your friends and family are going to go through the same process that all refugees go through when they want to come to the United States. When you are being considered for resettlement to the U.S., you will have at least 2 interviews. First, you will have a pre-screening interview with the Resettlement Support Center, RSC. Then you will have an interview with an officer from the U.S. government. The officer is called a refugee officer. The interview is called the USCIS interview. This is a very important interview. This interview will determine if the U.S. government approves your refugee case and that you are eligible for resettlement to the United States. After you have been referred for consideration for resettlement in the United States, you will be contacted to attend a pre-screening interview by a Resettlement Support Center, or RSC, nearest you. Your interview with the RSC is to gather the data for you and all of your family members on your case and gather a summary of your case history. Or she will ask you important questions about how and why you fled your country of origin, and will compile the biographic information needed for initial security checks. He or she will also ask you to provide biographic information about many of your relatives, even if they are not with you. An RSC staff person will also take your photograph during this visit. The RSC caseworker is responsible for collecting information concerning your application for resettlement to the United States as a refugee. During your pre-screening interview, the caseworker will record your story about the reasons why you left your country and why you feel you cannot return to your country now. If the caseworker does not speak your language, an interpreter will be provided by the RSC. RSC interpreters are highly trained and professional. The interpreter's responsibility is to help you and your caseworker communicate. The interpreter will not add to or leave out any part of your story. They will interpret everything you and the caseworker say and change nothing in the meaning of your words. If you have concerns about the interpretation, please communicate this. At any time during this interview, you may ask any questions or request that the caseworker repeat or rephrase a question if you do not understand or if something is unclear. You may also talk to an RSC staff if you do not feel comfortable or do not feel like you can communicate well with your interpreter. It is your obligation to be honest. You must always be accurate and truthful in every detail. Never make up answers. If you do not know the answer to a question, you should state that you do not know. Your answers should be as specific, accurate, and complete as possible. After your pre-screening interview, your information will be sent to other U.S. government agencies for security checks. These agencies investigate the information you have provided to make sure that it is true and accurate. Sometimes, security clearance can take many months to complete and, in some cases, may not be granted by the U.S. government. Come to your pre-screening interview with whatever identifying documentation you have for yourself and all family members on your case. As a refugee, many of your personal documents may have been lost or destroyed. Below is a list of documents that may be useful at your pre-screening interview. If you have them, you should bring the originals or copies with you to the appointment. Anticipate many months between your pre-screening interview with your RSC caseworker and your USCIS interview. Your application will not be forgotten or lost. When it is time for your USCIS interview, the RSC will notify you. In the meantime, it is very important you keep in touch with the RSC regarding any changes to your case, such as the birth of a child, death of a family member, marriage of a family member, or changes in your location or contact information. If your case passes through the initial security screening, you will be contacted by the RSC and scheduled for an interview conducted by specially trained United States government officers from the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, which is a division of the United States Department of Homeland Security, or DHS. Everyone on your case must attend this interview. Before your USCIS interview, you should sit down and write a summary of the events that led to you having to flee your country. You should write them down in the order they happened. This can include the dates you fled your home or the dates you received threats. Some of these events may bring up bad or difficult memories, but it is important to be ready to speak about them to the refugee officer. You do not have to write this in English. You can write this in any language. If you cannot write, you can ask a friend or relative to help you, or draw simple pictures of events to help you remember. Every person on your case file needs to attend the interview. This includes babies and young children, unless the RSC tells you otherwise. Refugee officer may interview all members of your family. They may even ask children questions about their case. You can ask to be interviewed separately from family members if you are not comfortable speaking in front of your family. You should answer every question truthfully. Giving wrong information can lead to your case being denied. If you do not know the answer to a question, you can tell the refugee officer you do not know or do not remember something. The refugee officer may ask about all of the family's personal information, including full names, tribal names, exact dates of birth for everyone on the case file, family composition. The officer will ask about your parents, siblings, and children, and where they all live now, addresses you have lived at in any country where you have lived, education and employment history, phone number and social media history, when major life events happened, like births, marriages, and when you moved or faced threats. The refugee officer will ask a lot of yes or no questions that might seem strange. This is normal. They are required to ask these questions to everyone. Some questions that you might be asked include: do you plan to go to the U.S. to take part in terrorism? Do you plan to go to the U.S. to hurt someone? Do you plan to go to the U.S. to become a prostitute? Do you plan to go to the U.S. to break any laws? The refugee officer will ask many questions about security and military history. Some questions that you might be asked include: did you ever receive weapons training? Did you ever carry a weapon? When and where did you serve in the military? What was the name of your unit? What tasks were you assigned to do while you were in the military? Have you ever supported a terrorist group or any militia? Usually, most questions will be answered by the principal applicant on the case. This is often the person that UNHCR or the RSC has been in touch with. However, the refugee officer may request to interview other family members separately. The refugee officer will ask you about why you left your home country and why you are afraid to return. The refugee officer will ask you about when you or your family were harmed, including where and when these events occurred, who was with you, who targeted you or harmed you, and why you were targeted or harmed. If you do not know the specific details, provide information about what you do know. For example, if you do not know the specific date, explain what season it was in, or if it was before or after a significant political event. Do not make up specific dates if you are not sure. When you explain to the officer why you fear for your safety in your country or why you were targeted in the past, make sure to explain to the officer any facts or information about your country that would help them understand your situation. Other subjects you may be asked during the interview include whether you served in the military and what you did when you were in the military, whether you were ever arrested, charged, or convicted of crimes in the past, your previous work, especially if you worked for the government of the country that you are fleeing from, whether you belong to any political party, even if you were forced to join the party, if you ever applied for a visa to come to the U.S. in the past. This includes applying for a diversity visa called the visa lottery. If you ever applied for or even started an electronic application for a visa to the U.S., you must tell the officer about that application. Officer may ask you many questions about the same topic or ask you the same question over again. Sometimes the refugee officer might read back to you 2 statements that you made and ask you to explain more. The refugee officer's focus on this area might be because they believe you gave different information earlier in the interview or in a previous interview with the RSC. The refugee officer might be asking you to let you clarify the contradiction. For example, if you said that you experienced threats in 2011, but you remember that those events were in 2012, explain that you had given the incorrect date, but now remember the correct date. If you have difficulty remembering details because you were hurt in the past, or it is difficult to speak about, you can explain this to the refugee officer. The refugee officer might also have read information about your country that is different than what you said in your interview. Explain your story truthfully. For example, if you said you are attacked because of your religion, and the officer read a report that people of your religion are safe in your country, explain specifically why you are afraid that you will be hurt. The refugee officer may ask whether you belong to or helped any armed groups. This includes paying a ransom to an armed group, buying supplies from an armed group, providing food, water, or shelter to an armed group. Be sure to fully explain to the refugee officer the circumstances in which you helped an armed group. For example, explain to the refugee officer if the armed group forced you to provide support, if the armed group threatened to harm you or your family if you did not provide support, if you did not know at the time that the people you helped were part of an armed group. In addition, document for RSC interview. Also bring the following documents to your interview if they apply to your situation. The refugee officer will not be able to give you a decision on your case the same day. Instead, you will get a letter later telling you the results. If you are approved, you still must wait to travel. You can only travel after the U.S. government has conducted security checks and you complete a medical exam. You may be contacted to complete medical exams before a decision is issued on your case. If you are contacted for medical exams or cultural orientation, this does not mean your case has been approved. In some locations, medical exams and cultural orientation happen before the U.S. government has made a decision in your case. The officer also cannot tell you when to expect the decision. Every case is different and takes a different amount of time. Some Sometimes decisions can take many months or many years. How to respond to questions when you do not know the answer. If you are asked a question and you do not know the answer, do not guess or provide incorrect information. If you do not remember some details, explain as much as you do know. Then explain why you do not remember the rest. It is better to say you do not remember or you do not know and explain why. For example, if they ask you what date something happened and you remember only that it was in summer 2013, tell them it was summer 2013 rather than giving a specific date. If you need a break, you can ask for one. It is not rude or impolite to ask for a short break during the interview. It is important for you to feel comfortable telling your whole story. If you are upset or uncomfortable, ask for a short break to calm down and recollect your thoughts. Do not leave anything out. Make sure you tell the officer everything that they ask you about. Answer the officer's questions and focus on the issue that the officer asked about. Always be truthful. Whatever they ask you about, always tell the truth. If you are afraid that your answer may hurt your case, it is still better to tell the truth. You can then explain why this detail should not hurt your case. The officer may deny your case if you give wrong information. Please subscribe my channel for latest updates and information for Wellcome. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe my channel. Good luck.